So welcome everyone to the Equal Group Black Futures webinar series. So today's webinar is all about Black women in leadership. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Rachael Owhin. I'm a senior consultant at the Equal Group, and the Equal Group is a data-driven equality, diversity and inclusion consultancy based in Birmingham, and we work alongside forward-thinking organisations to provide consulting and tech solutions that deliver sustainable progress. And I'm going to hand over to our amazing guest speakers today to give a short introduction of themselves. So I'll hand over to Yetunde first.
Hi everybody, my name is Yetunde Dania. I am a partner at international law firm Trowers and Hamlins solicitors. We are, as I said, an international law firm. We have 4 offices in the UK, and I'm also head of our Birmingham office. I have been a solicitor for longer than I care to admit. And during that time, it's been a really interesting career journey. I'm really looking forward to sharing some of that information with you. In terms of my day job, I have my own team of about 12 people. The office that I head up actually comprises of about 150 people, out of which 15 are partners. I'm quite unique to be a Black female head of office. So it's a really exciting time. I sometimes pinch myself constantly saying, oh my gosh, this amazing experience is happening to me. But yeah, that's a bit about me.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Yetunde. And I'll hand over to Yemi.
Hi everyone, my name is Yemi Jackson and I'm the founder and CEO of Engage Transform. Engage Transform is a talent acquisition and development company. I've been running it since probably full-time 2019. My background before that was I was a CFO for I was in finance. I'm a qualified accountant, and I like Yetunde, embarrassed to say, look, I was actually in that field for 20 years, 25 years. So some of you I know now, trying to guess my age. So I was in the thick of the corporate world. I never thought I would end up being an entrepreneur. So I'll obviously share my journey with you. So I've experienced what it's like to be in a leader in that sort of finance, very male dominated, very, same sort of people from the same cloth background for 25 years. And then also what it's like to be in your own business. So unfortunately, we do face these challenges, particularly when people don't assume I'm the one that owns a business and they think I'm just a recruiter. And you see their faces and they actually say, well, I actually do own a business and we're going to do it differently to how others work. So I look forward to sharing my journey, corporate world, and also my new journey and why I decided to set up my own business as well with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Yemi. Thank you, Yetunde. So I'm just going to set the scene a little bit to talk about why we're here. So today is all about talking about Black women in leadership. And there's a few stats that we've been looking at that have really, underpinned the conversation today. So one stat that we found was that 70% of Black women in finance and professional services and big technology believe they're being paid less than their comparable peers. 68% of Black women surveyed reported experiencing racial bias in the workplace. So that's 2 in 3 Black women in the workplace. And this increases to 87% when it comes to women in senior executive positions. Despite obstacles that Black women face in the workplace, they're substantially more likely than their non-Black peers to say that they're interested in pursuing executive leadership roles. So there's a huge ambition there to be in executive leadership roles, but clearly also a lot of barriers. So that's just setting some of the context. And I just want to speak to Yetunde and Yemi just about their journey to where they are today. How did you get to where you are? What has the journey been like so far? I'll start with you, Yemi.
Wow, right. Where do I begin? Right. So I start with my sort of corporate experience because I'm assuming a lot of you here are in terms of that career focus. and rightly so. So it's quite sad. I was one of those people that actually wanted to be an accountant, because most accountants I met actually fell into it and they were like, oh, I didn't really want to do this. I wanted to be an accountant, which was, but I absolutely loved it. I wasn't one of those ones that just did the numbers in the background. I had opportunities from quite young in my career. I was quite feisty and young and didn't fully understand politics in the workplace and things like that. And I think actually that mentality is sometimes quite healthy, because I think once you start to be over-conscious about it, then it can start to affect the way you perform. I started my career mainly in actually retail, but in the finance departments, and I was quite lucky. The words we use now for things like sponsors and mentors, I actually had sponsors and mentors, but we didn't call them that. And I didn't actually realise how much of an impact they were having and fighting for me in the background to get onto schemes and maybe stuff that was actually only earmarked for those that came from Oxbridge. So most of my career was pretty cool, I'll be honest with you. I kind of sailed through to an extent. And it's when you start to get into, and I'm sure Yetunde will share, you'll find when you're that kind of junior, cheeky, and I was always the one that's sent into the rooms to say to think, to senior leadership. But actually, once you start to get into leadership and people start to see you as a threat, that's actually when you start to experience the sort of the raw racism. And it came a bit to me as a bit of a shock when I first started to experience it, because I hadn't handled it before. In spite of that, as Rachael said, in terms of regardless of how much challenges we have, we're quite tenacious, right? So most of my career, I continued to just kept pushing through. And it's when I got to that head of level that all of the challenges became quite difficult. And I found myself, when I was applying for my first director role, then all the excuses start to come out. Oh, you're not strategic enough. There's always some kind of excuses they came up with. And as per usual with me, when I got frustrated, rather than just go into a rut and do this quiet quitting, which I know is quite common nowadays, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go off and get whatever it is that, I decided to do an MBA, because I thought, well, they keep talking about this MBA, right? Let me just go and check out and see what it does and how much of a difference it made. And actually, that's when the transition started to come, because what I learned from that is not so much of the raw talent that you have, but it's how you package it and sometimes how you frame stuff. And yes, racism is still very real, but actually there are some cheat codes. There are certain ways we can sort of get over it and still advance forward. But we'll share a bit more about that with you. So yeah, so a lot of some of the pivotal point for me was actually going off to do my MBA. It doesn't mean you need an MBA, because what you can do is make sure you network with the right people that can give you some of the stuff that you can learn. And you don't have to pay so much as I did to get the knowledge. So we'll share some of that with you today. In terms of why I decided to start my own business, my last role was I worked with almost like an Alan Sugar kind of character, and he was just completely, it was just completely crazy. And after you work in a business like that, you just get this thirst for actual entrepreneurship and that fear of actually, oh my God, what's going to happen if I step out of my 6-figure salary and start from scratch? Because when you're around people like that, you start to think, well, if they can do it, right, I think I can. And that's how I started Engage Transform, because I just felt that in the market, and it pains me to say even up to now, very few executive searches care enough to put their neck out to put forward women of colour, people of colour into positions of leadership. And what you tend to find is you don't even hear about the opportunities. So that executive search and recruitment, I think, plays quite a big part in terms of why we haven't seen as much advancement. And I'm determined to try and sort of break that cycle so that our people hear about these opportunities and then they can choose if they want to go for them or not. But in the past, we didn't hear about them. They went to their top 10, which tends to be male, white, male pale. And then you don't even get a chance to even apply for those jobs. So that's why I feel quite passionate about what I do, is to try and break that cycle. And then I just kind of realised, actually, no matter what job I did, I found that I wanted to do more than my actual qualifications, allowed me to. And that's why I set up Engage Transform.
So I'm just going to move on to Yetunde. If you could, answer the same question, just tell us a bit about your journey, how you got to being where you are today.
Yeah, my journey, I guess I need to share with you that I was fostered by English foster parents as a baby. And I do believe that experience really gave me a sense of, one, being able to be whatever I wanted to be. It was quite interesting. I was fostered from the age of 1. I didn't leave them until I was 18, and I never actually left, I guess. But on top of that, for those of you who are familiar with the Nigerian community, my heritage is Nigerian, and you know, it's very professions based. So Yemi's here as an accountant, you know, it's doctor, lawyer, accountant. And so, you know, I was in touch with my natural parents, and, you know, I kind of got that sort of messaging. At school in Great Yarmouth, being a Black kid, one of few, when I raised that I wanted to be a solicitor, it was immediately distilled. It was like, no, I don't think you'll be able to do that. You know, there was a computer thing at the time, and I think I put in what I was interested in, and it came out of prison warden, and I was just like, no, I want to do law, but I don't want to do it from the criminal side. So I think, you know, it seemed that everything was stacked against me, but I used that as an opportunity to say, actually, the system or people seem to not want me to do this. What is it that's so, what's on the other side, so to speak? So, you know, I decided that that's what I was going to do. And I, you know, I had a long journey to get there, and I picked up mentors and sponsors along the way. We'll certainly talk about that. And then I qualified, and I remember going, wow, is this it? You know, literally, is this what you didn't want me to do? I qualified into a legal aid firm. So legal aid firms inherently are very diverse because of the clientele that those organisations will be serving. So, you know, it is unfortunately the crime, the immigration, the welfare benefits. I was doing housing at that time. And then I decided, you know what, I want to go into the private sector. I don't want to get pigeonholed into just legal aid. I want to be able to have a decent standard of living for myself, etc. Legal aid rates were low and remain low, but that's a different conversation. And so I jumped ship. I joined a private practice. And then it was just a case of, okay, so they told me I couldn't be a solicitor, or it would be difficult. You know, let me see how far I can go. And yeah, looking left and right, yeah, you know, it was just me, but I almost felt a sense of, well, if it's just me, then I just have to keep charging forward. Don't accept no as a reason to stop. And to be honest, that's where my journey has really taken me. Just that kind of like, well, let me just see if I can do this. Let me see if I can do that. But being head of office, well, there's a couple of things that happened in the last couple of years, and I'll talk about that journey to becoming head of office. I think I have disbelief in myself, but I will share a bit more of that in a moment.
Great, thank you so much. Definitely want to hear about the journey to becoming head of office. So at the beginning, I shared some stats around, you know, being overlooked for promotion, experiencing racial bias in the workplace, all of these things. And just in terms of your experience, what barriers have you faced in your journey to getting to where you are today?
So in my sort of corporate career as a sort of finance director, you find it's a twofold thing, right? And so you find it's, you know, initially it's like you walk in, it's the color, right? So it's just like, oh, okay. And then the sexism starts to come in as well. So you'll find, you know, so you've got that sort of, I say, you know, I always say, like, Black women, we don't face the glass ceiling, because with glass, right? Because at least with a glass, you can actually see. There's an acknowledgement, right? You can see through glass. So I see white women are seen, right? But for us, it's like, I feel, obviously you didn't get to know here, we've achieved it, so it is possible. I feel it's a concrete ceiling, so you're not sometimes not even seen, which is ridiculous, because hopefully my volume is a bit better. Is that better?
It's still a little bit low, but I can hear you.
I'm so sorry. There's not much I can do. I've tried everything.
I can hear you.
Yeah. So what we need to be. So you find you've got that double, right? So where they pretend you're not even there, you're like, but I'm the only one here. So how is it possible for you not to even acknowledge that I'm in this room, right? So, but it was quite interesting. I was talking to a friend yesterday in terms of personality-wise. I was definitely that very strong, you know, my way or the no, because I felt you had to have this almost combative sort of, you know, because or else people would try to railroad you. So in the end, before I was railroaded, if anything, I was probably the oppressor sometimes in some rooms, because it was always people trying to take advantage. So you felt that you had to constantly be fighting for your sort of space, really. And particularly in finance, I found, particularly in most of the organisation I worked, most of them would tend to be FTSE 100 companies. Very, very few of us, very few. But like Yetunde, you just have to think, well, actually, I'm going to just keep pushing forward. I'm never going to let them dictate what I can do. I will determine what my career journey is, and you have to take ownership of where you're going. And I think the reason why Black women are quite ambitious is because I think our mothers are, right? Regardless of what role in the society they had, my mum actually didn't get an opportunity to have formal education, but she was determined that her children will get that. So whatever she needed to do to make sure we had formal education, she was going to make it happen. So while she may not have formal education, she was probably one of the most brightest women I know. She would do like maths in her head, like just like that, you know. And she always pushed us. She always pushed us. And because she only had girls, so nobody was going to tell her girls was not going to be as ambitious and as, you know, as successful as men, really.
So thank you. Yeah, I'll hand that over to Yetunde.
Can you repeat the question? I'm so intense in listening to Yemi that I've forgotten the question, which is me all over. Sorry, I'm like, I'm a panelist, but I'm learning stuff.
No, of course, we're all here to learn. But the question was just around barriers you faced along this journey.
Yeah, I think the barriers, for me, you know, the legal profession sort of 20, 30 years ago, you know, it looked very different to what it looks like now. So it was very male, white dominated. And those barriers, I have no doubt, were there. But for me, it was just a case of, I haven't got time to focus on them, because if I focus on them, then, you know, I'm either going to stop or, you know, they're going to get me down. And so they're definitely there. They are definitely there. So some of the experiences that I've had is, you know, white, pretty female solicitor being taken to a meeting, a key meeting, come back, ask me that's not been to the meeting to undertake the work. And I'm just like, but hold on a moment. You know, and also at that time, the profession was very different, with, you know, sexuality being put out there and as a hook to get the clients in, and some sleazy things are happening. I think the other thing that I've seen, you know, is the racial pay gap. At that time, I didn't know what it was, but, you know, I've always been about equity, and certainly when I became a manager and I saw that, you know, I stamped it out immediately. I guess for me, if the hardest things have been I've always been quite clear about where I want to go. So, you know, you make partner, you're just at the bottom of a run of another long ladder, because there are various different levels of partner. And I can remember, you know, sort of saying at one firm, look, I want to get into the equity. Can we work towards it? Oh, yes, you didn't. Yes, of course we can work towards it. No, we don't want a Black woman as part of our equity. It's kind of what I heard. And so, you know, I then heard, well, you said that I can work towards this. You know, how are you going to support me? What are you going to help me to do to get there? But it felt like every year there was something else. We haven't done this. We haven't done that. We haven't. And it just felt very easy to say, there's the criteria, you need it, but we're not going to give you any support whatsoever, knowing that you're a Black woman, knowing that you'd possibly be the first. We're not going to give you any support around that. So I guess those are some of the real kind of like challenges forget the microaggressions. I mean, those are just, the microaggressions have been in the past daily, and the armour is on. And I guess the other thing that I would say is, I put my hand up. I'm guilty of code switching. At the early stages of my career, I just wanted to fit in. So, especially in the private practice arena, code switched all day. I look back on some of my behaviour and I'm like, no. And, seriously, some of the behaviours that I've engaged in to emulate men, I look back and I go, I really hope that the next generation really don't have to go through that.
Yeah, you've touched on an interesting point there. So at what point, or what was it that made you stop doing that? When did the realization come?
You know what, for me personally, it's when I started leading my team. When I had a situation where I was forced to step into this light. I think I'd been told that I wasn't good enough for a very long time. So I recall an appraisal and I was just told, you're not good enough. You're not as good as me. You're not as good as white counterpart. You are basically rubbish. And on the back of that, I then had to step into not only leading my team, but engaging. And I'm just saying, well, this person has told me that I'm rubbish and I'm not good enough. And it got me down for a little while. And it was a challenging economic environment at the time. And I remember I was sitting there waiting to be told that I was going to be made redundant. I didn't let my team know. I did not let my team know that we were not doing well. And I recall a client calling and just saying, can you do this piece of work? And I was like, I've got so much space on my desk, I can do anything. And that client actually started sending a lot of work through, and my confidence began to build. But I stepped into my own light, which for me is about authenticity. I cannot be anybody else other than myself. And I stepped into my light and I said, this person was that particular way and that particular way. All I can give you is Yetunde. And this is who Yetunde is. And either you get her or you don't get her. But I cannot code switch. I cannot be something else. I cannot be what you think the profession should be. I can't be what I think a great lawyer should look like and sound like and all the rest of it. I can just be me. And so that's what I've sold, me. And I think about my team, and there's been opportunities for them to leave, but I think they have appreciated that authenticity, that realism, that honesty. And people have organizations have tried to split us, and I'm amazed. There's one woman, I literally have worked with her for 20 odd years. It's a long time. So that's my approach, authenticity all the way.
That's awesome. It's awesome to hear your journey, really, and getting to that point of authenticity and just truly being yourself, because that's all we can be at the end of the day, isn't it? So yeah, we've touched on, where we think this ambition as Black women come from. Thanks for sharing on that, Yemi. So I just wanted to ask about change. Like, what change do you think has taken place? What change have you seen in your years in your career so far? So I'll start with Yemi on this one.
Okay. So I think it's thank you for mentioning about actually doing that deeper work about knowing yourself, because I think one thing that a lot of I blame it on my industry and stuff like that. It's very, very analytical. It's all about numbers. It's all very much about no room for kind of, do you know what I mean, personalities and stuff. It's very much about, so what advanced my career was with knowing my stuff and knowing my data, and I sort of maybe sometimes hid behind that too much. And I remember actually not realizing, I don't even know I was conscious of that I code switched. I just kind of played the role of being excellent at what I did. But I think one of the things that I look back and I think, oh my God, I don't think I was very empathetic to incompetency. So I was very, very quite, very much about just didn't understand it. So if people didn't have ambition or they just wanted to I didn't appreciate sometimes people had a different background. So as far as I'm concerned, most of the Black people that I had in my circle were very ambitious and very much go-getters. And looking back, I think actually sometimes thinking about the background that people come from different places, and some people need more support than others. Now I'm in this space of very much about people and what drives them. And I know actually you need to think about equity. It's not just about making equal opportunities for people, but it's like what extra step do you need to go to actually bring people along in terms of their confidence, in terms of microaggression. So I think in the thick of my career, I was probably the other extreme of maybe confident because I knew my stuff very, very well. And I didn't really start addressing what am I actually doing for the next generation that's coming along until probably the last kind of 6 years, really thinking, right, okay. And I think that's one of the things I just wanted to mention. I find there's a difference between sometimes those that have come from, because you see it a lot in politics as well. So you'll find most of the Black politicians that have done really well, actually, some of them have come from an African background. And I think we fail to appreciate and understand that people have different upbringing. So I wasn't born in this country, I was born in Nigeria. So when you're in Nigeria, when people say you can't be, nobody can tell you can't be anything, because you're like, what are you talking about, right? You can't tell me I can't be an accountant or a lawyer or a doctor, because I've got a doctor and a lawyer, and I can see that representation. And whereas those that have been raised in this country, like my husband, sometimes when you don't see it, it's harder to become it. So I've invested a lot more time in terms of being authentic, but also appreciating everybody's journey is actually different, and some people need a bit more support to actually see what they can be, so that they can actually become. And yeah, authentic is really important. Be yourself. I still think you guys may agree or disagree with me. I still do think there's an element of code switching required, right? Let's be realistic, right? The fact is, as much as we say, oh, it's not right or whatever, there's something innate in us that actually appreciates good grammar. Good grammar is something. They did a research and they found that actually grammar is not something it's taught. It's something it's something within us. So even if you don't speak very well, when somebody is not articulating themselves very well, there's something in you that kind of just doesn't feel comfortable, right? So if you're going to be a lawyer, if you're going to be an accountant, if you're going to go into a corporate space, people have to be able to understand, and you have to be able to articulate yourself, right? So when we're talking about code switching, it's not about denying your social, what you enjoy outside of work, but you have to also be willing to understand that actually if you're talking to an audience, you have to speak in their language. Does that make sense? So we need to get a balance as Black people, because I think sometimes there's a group of Black people that have gone too far to the other extreme. You can't come into work sagging, right, and not willing to speak the language of those that are, that you're speaking to, because they can't appreciate or understand. So you've got all that talent package, but if you don't package it in a certain way, unfortunately, you're not even going to get door open. So I really want us to get that balance.
I think sorry, Yemi, I have to say, I do agree with you frustratingly, because there's even that experience of accents from across the UK. And certainly I've been in events where young people from, for example, Liverpool, have worried about their accents, or that if they've got a northern accent, for example. So I think there is something there, frustratingly. It's really, but then you could argue that, a lot of people from Black, African and Caribbean are taught to speak, I guess I should say, the King's English, but we were taught to speak, properly, whatever that is. That often, I know when I was calling about jobs and so on, people would not necessarily think that I was Black. But I do agree with you. It is a package of professionalism, whatever, even if you went back to the Caribbean or to Africa, there is, even in those professions or what have you in the workplace, there is a professionalism, whatever that professionalism is.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean you lose yourself. So we're not talking here about being forced and stuff like that. But you just think about the audience. So, when we talk about accents, so the example I always use, right? has anybody ever complained about Nelson Mandela having an accent? Have you ever heard anybody go, oh, I don't understand what he's saying? No. You don't think, because what he did is he slowed his speech, and he ensured that he is one of the best orators that we have, right? So I think when people sometimes complain about the way it's not necessarily about our accent, but it's, if I speak really fast, and you want an audience to get whether that's been a workplace, you have to make sure that you slow it down and actually think about what you're trying to get across. And ultimately, people need to remember, you are a product, right? You are consistently selling yourself, right? We're not talking about selling out, but you are consistently selling yourself. So if you're finding in certain places you're frustrated, you don't understand, you're feeling like you don't have, why do I have to change to be like that? We're not asking if you change, but just think about, what are you selling, right? And if that's not the place for you, then think about the market that you're selling to. And in your career, you are the product, right? So you've got to think about who's the audience and what adjustments do I need to do in order for them to be able to buy into me.
I think there's some comments in the chat about, somebody said that OG said, I think those terms, professionalism is still seen as predominantly assimilating to whiteness. And I think that's really interesting. Is that because we're talking about professionalism because we're in the UK? I don't know. Go to the Caribbean, go to Africa. Okay, what's the equivalent of professionalism there? There is I think that's an interesting comment.
I would like to add to that, actually, because I actually think sometimes in some circles in Africa, it's actually even more snobbery, right, than the West. And I'm not sure, and we could argue because of colonialism, and it makes me laugh sometimes when you're in Nigeria and you've got men in 3-piece suit in 40, 50 degrees, right? Because do you know what I mean? They've not only got the tie, but they've got the waistcoat, and you're just like, oh my God, what are you doing to yourself, right? So the reality of it is, professionalism has nothing to do with your hair. But I'll be fair, I was just thinking the other day, I do have my afro out sometimes, and I thought, oh my God, in my 25 years as in finance, I never ever went to work with my afro. So all of the stuff, the different hairstyles that I'm doing now, it's been in the last 6 years. So I didn't actually maybe realize how much I was code switching, and I just thought it was normal. So please remember, professionalism has absolutely nothing to do with your dressing, right, or your hair. But what we are saying is, depending on what industry, if you're in marketing, then what's cool is really, you can be a bit more, kind of, I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? Is whatever career you've chosen, try and understand some of the rules of the game, right? Try and understand it, because you don't want somebody to be so, I remember actually one of my female finance director, that she was known, but she was exceptional. She was a finance director of in Sainsbury's 25 years ago, right? And CFO of, that Sainsbury's was £20 billion business then. And she always used to wear sort of leopard skin shoes, right? Because she was already there. She don't have to prove anything to anybody. Who cares, right? There was nobody, but I guarantee you, if you're at that trainee level and you turned up with, with leopard heels and stuff like that, you will get a few looks, and people will be like, ooh, she's a bit too much for us. So it all depends at what level you're at. And, so Yetunde said, once you became a head of, it comes, as you go further up, actually, sometimes it comes with a bit more flexibility. When you're going through the ladder, sometimes you just need to be mindful on the space that you're in. Nothing to do with the hair. Yes, I do think a little bit of dressing. Yeah. So I remember once, actually, one of my team members, my boss came to me and she said, oh my God, Yemi, she turned up and almost everything was hanging out, and she was saying how embarrassed the men were because they were just blushing around her. And I just had to sit down with them and go, look, dress like that, you're going clubbing. But when you're in the workplace, unfortunately, as bright as you are, all people are going to see is below your face. So we just need to, there's just certain stupid things that we just need to think, you know what, it's not really that important. That is not code switching. That's what I just wanted to clarify. Code switching is not, it's just making sure you do understand the space you're in, some of the stuff that you do have to work around, but so that it doesn't stop you from fully potentializing. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. But I think, ensuring that you're understood is the key, and there's so many different versions of being professional. But thanks for sharing your experiences on that. I just wanted to touch on, getting into executive leadership. Like, what are some of the key things that you believe have got you to where you are? So I know that we spoke previously about support. So how important is it to share and support other Black women to get to the executive level? And what does that support look like? Has that support looked like for you?
I think it's absolutely key. I'm really, really lucky in Birmingham in that there is a group of Black people, men and women, who we all kind of started out at a similar sort of time, and we've all progressed together at different times, but we're all now partners. So, you know, I'm really lucky that I have that group to call upon if I've got a problem. In terms of mentorship, I gather my mentors from all different places. Really, I don't have one set person. I guess my biggest champion is my husband. He's the one who knows absolutely everything. He's the one that I've been, you know, fortunate enough to have his ear, and he's not in a profession as such, but his words of wisdom have been, you know, they've been spot on every time. So I think that is really important. And I've seen in the chat about coaches, and I have had coaching. There was a time when seriously I had a lot of, I totally lacked confidence. And so work actually helped to get me a coach. And it happened to be a white man, but it worked. He was able to empathize with some of my personal circumstances and some of the things that I'd gone through. The most important thing though is you need to have somebody, because sometimes it's very easy to choose somebody just because of their position, but it's really important that you are able to work with them. And coaches are not necessarily, mentors are not necessarily for life. It might be for a particular moment in time. So, you know, I was saying that about my aspirations to get to equity, and I managed to get there last year. But during that journey, somebody said to me, why don't you speak to this person who wasn't in the legal profession? It just happened that she was a Black woman who had got to a senior position at an organisation that I had some admiration for. And so it was really easy. Reached out on LinkedIn and I said to her, look, this is me, this is what I'm trying to achieve. Would you be able to spare an hour of time? You need to be respectful of people's time and space. What she told me in that hour really opened my eyes. And I'll share it with you now. And it's one of those, you know, when you're writing a paper, and I had to write quite a long paper, and she was just, Yetunde, look at your language. You know, this is all great stuff, but it sounds very flat. You know, in terms of, well, weren't you instrumental in doing this? And wasn't that your idea? Yeah, well, it was, but it was something that worked. But she said it was just about the way that you layer it up, because it is hard as a woman, let alone a Black woman, to blow one's own trumpet. And so, but by the time I finished with that paper, having spoken to her, I was just like, whoa, this is amazing. So yeah, mentorship is, you know, you have to have somewhere to go, not only to celebrate the successes, but when it's really difficult. So that from that point of being resilient, because it can be a lonely space if you look to your left and look to your right and nobody else looks like you. But I know that, you know, certainly for the people who get in touch with me via LinkedIn, I will always try and give them an hour of my time, you know. So, and then the other thing is, and I'm sure we're stepping to having a conversation about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And one of the things that I've been really fortunate about is sponsorship, which is slightly different. So from the allies around me, I have received sponsorship, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Things to add to that.
Oh, I mean, it was just brilliant. I think I loved what Yetunde said at the beginning about framing, right? So all these sort of terminologies I didn't even know about. So most of my career I muddled through. I didn't have mentors, I didn't have sponsors, and I didn't have a lovely group of people like Yetunde had in Birmingham, right? I didn't. It was quite, I felt most of it was quite a lonely journey for me. And most of the sort of networking and the mentorships and the sponsors that I've built has been probably more in the last 7 years at the very tip of my career. So I wish I had that earlier on, right? And we will definitely talk about the difference between mentors and sponsors and coaches. I didn't get coaches. I didn't have a coach until probably about 2015 when I got so stuck and I kept thinking, I know I'm director level. You know, I've got the technical skills and everything, but what I didn't have or didn't know was to how to frame, and it's so important. And again, I want to encourage you, right? See your career as almost like you are the product, right? You invest, you know, and taking time, and I always encourage people also do a self-audit. Do a self-audit in terms of where is the journey, where are you going, where's your strategy, where do you want to be, right? I remember I didn't, you know, I was just, like I said, muddling through my career, doing really, really well, you know, getting promoted, getting paid more money and stuff like that, but I didn't really have a long-term plan. And the first time I sat down and had a bit of a longer-term vision was when an executive search. So there are some really good ones before I started that said, well, Yemi, where are you going? What do you want to be? Do you want to be a finance director? What is it? Where's this stuff going? I thought, finance director, first person that actually even told me that I could be one. And she was the first person that dropped that kind of seed. So it's, you know, we'll talk about later on about actually building almost like a bit of a board of directors. So see yourself as the product, see yourself as a whole package and business, and build this kind of, think about building almost like a board of directors around your life and your strategy. So that would include mentors, that would include sponsors, which are very different, right? And I do believe in the power of coaching. I really do believe in the power of coaching. And then also the network. And there's different networks for different things, right? When you're networking, some of it is purely for social and you just want to let your head down. And, you know, when Yetunde and I and Rachael were talking about this, you just want a group of people that you just want to let rip of how awful that day was, right? But there's some networks that actually is for about those people that will take you to the next level. They are, you know, they're with people that you want to sort of start to aspire to be like or get in with them. So networking, be very strategic about it and what you want to get out of it. But also it's got to be reciprocal, right? So when people support you, how are you supporting those that are coming behind you, and how can you support those that have supported you as well? So yeah, framing is important. So if you take away about, it's not most Black women, most Black people, we've got the technical skills because, you know, we've had to work twice as hard, but sometimes we don't know how to then sit and write that up. Like Yetunde said, how do you put that together when somebody look at it and they go, bloody hell, oh my God, look what this, you know, she's phenomenal, right? You've done it all, but we're not very good at being visible and actually telling those that are really important what we've achieved, right? And that is not, and also when you're telling those what you've achieved, don't just aim for the person that's just you report into. I would say talk about 2 layers up, right? Build networks, not just with your boss, but your boss's bosses. Yeah.
It's almost like a mini coaching session for everyone there. So yeah, do be taking notes and put your questions in the chat as well. But just, on this point of equity, because that's what we're all about. So what do you think needs to change to establish equity for Black women in leadership?
You know what, the conversation is happening. It just feels like the murder of George Floyd, I don't know, it sparks something. And, you know, that momentum needs to keep going, but it's not about just just the conversation, it's about the action. But what I can see now compared to when I came into the legal profession is that people are doing, so there's a great conversation in the chat about locks. There's that recognition of hair, there's that, you know, we're having these really, really open conversations and slowly but surely people are saying, this is me, this is who I am, and also I'm going to call this out. I think people around us, and it's very, the entire system is not against us. It's difficult, yes, but the entire system is not against us. And so there are some fantastic allies out there. And I celebrate, for example, my firm, who the partnership has just got it. George Floyd was murdered. I rang up one of the senior equity partners and just said, listen, you need to hear this and you need to hear this rule because it's 20 odd years in the making. This is how I feel. We need to change this, because if we don't change this, then we are not going to attract and retain some of the best talent that there is out there. If we can't do that, then how do we appeal to, the diverse sectors that we are trying to service, because the legal profession is about serving the entire community in different forms, whether it's organisations, people, and so on. But how can it be that, you know, we don't reflect it? Those conversations have started happening. They're difficult conversations. I'm not saying it's all perfect, and we're certainly not there yet. But the fact that we can have the conversation, I think, is a massive start. And the fact that collectively we're willing to take action is really good. I appreciate that's not the same for everybody. And I'm really lucky. It is that, you know, what Yemi said, I'm there now. So I'm closer to retirement than I am sort of like my next promotion. So, I can be more vocal and more challenging. And I think for those of you who are there, I think whether you want the responsibility or not, you know, we owe it to the next generation that's coming behind us to make sure that the journey is easier, as opposed to, and what can happen is that, you know, some women will draw the drawbridge up behind them and just say, well, I'm quite happy with it just being me, and I've forged this nice little place out for myself, and I don't want, you know, anybody else who really looks like me to come and join me in this particular space. Change is happening. It's slow. Matthew's on the call will know that I will constantly say I want change by Tuesday, but it is happening, and we just need to keep the conversations happening, not just in Black History Month, but throughout, you know, all the time, whether it's the opportunity to write articles, post on LinkedIn, how we feel, our experiences, because the more that people hear them, the more that people can respond, engage, educate themselves, learn, and so on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We have so many questions to go through, but I'm conscious that we only have 11 minutes left, and we want to launch a quick poll just to see how people are finding the webinar. So if my colleagues could just post that, and then we'll get to some of the questions from the audience. So someone asked a question around board positions, and I know both you, Yemi and Yetunde, you hold and have held board positions. So are there different or additional considerations to establish equity for Black women in voluntary leadership positions, for example, trustee and board roles versus paid leadership positions? So do you have any thoughts around that?
I'm really lucky that I've always been encouraged. Work has always encouraged the doing or taking board positions and getting that experience. But when I think about it outside of that, we should all be trying to do that, because that's a way of getting a seat at the table, whether it's from, I think my first one was school governor. I sat there just looking around like, wow, this is how things work. Was a school governor, and then I think I went on to the board of an arts centre. That was a bit more tricky. The personalities, I just said, you're not ready for me because you're quite happy in your space, in which case I've got to go and sprinkle my magic somewhere else that's willing to move on and change. So I think there is a lot, but there's some really great training out there and conversations that you can have if you are nervous about it, because it is really daunting. But there is some great training, but I would encourage everybody to at least be on the board of one thing, something, from whether it's school governor to, something really, sexy, so to speak.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no, very, very passionate about that space. I don't think enough of us put ourselves forward. And actually, a lot of them are crying out. So a lot of the boards are, so from the perspective of, I help to place people on boards. So, and then also I'm part of we run a training program where it gives people an opportunity to be an apprentice on a board. Passionate about that space, because we need our voices, right? Because being angry and talking, being angry outside and holding protests is never going to bring change. You have to drive the change from within. And that's by taking places in those strategic positions. And what I say to people as well is, when you in those board roles, it also helps you with your day job, right? Because you're going to, and again, talk about network, right? It will support you. That's where maybe you'll pick up some sponsors and mentors that are 10, 20 years ahead of you in this particular area that will support you. So you're giving back, but also there's so much you get from those. So pursue them. Look for those opportunities and take them, because they're looking for actually Black people.
Yeah, I mean, in the chat it does say, you know, a lot of people don't know even that the opportunity exists, and it can be far removed. But that's why I say potentially look in your own circles, you know, whether it's through church, whether it's with an allotment, there is so many different ways to get involved. And I think it's about challenging each other, and by saying, oh, I'm thinking about doing this, what do you think? The only social media I am on is LinkedIn, and I do find that, you know, if you ask for help, there'll be somebody out there to help you. So if it is a case that you're thinking about it, you're a bit nervous, not sure what you could go for, I would say post something. The one thing that was quite obvious post George Floyd is that, you know, Black has a currency, because everybody then was like, oh, look at our board, it's not representative. We need to make it more representative. So, you know, if you were to say, I'm thinking about a board position, and you posted that on LinkedIn, believe me, I think you'd probably be totally inundated with opportunities. But there's a number of things. I think Get On Board is one. But there are a number of websites where you can indicate that you're interested.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks for that really practical advice there. But yeah, we definitely need to be taking up more board positions. And you know, there was a comment in the chat that, you know, some people don't even know it's an opportunity, but hopefully more people are becoming aware of these opportunities now. So I'm going to take one more question that has been posted, and it links to another question that I wanted to ask you both. Oh, I've lost it now. So, like, what advice would you give to young Black women who are keen to become leaders in their field? And we were speaking earlier about, you know, what advice would you give your younger self? So just, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? I think Yetunde looks like you're ready, or Yemi.
Okay, I'll be honest with you, I'll go first. So on reflection, actually, of my career, like I said, there's a benefit of hindsight, right? So I think it's actually understanding that, yes, you know, whilst racism exists and there's sexism and all the horrible isms, right? In actual fact, if you go down to that human level of individuals, right? So rather than get into a situation where you get yourself into a spiral, any challenges that you have at work, I would always say take the opportunity to actually have a conversation individual with them, to actually say, look, regardless of how you think your action, what your intentions, this is how the action, how it impacts me. And actually what I found, you know, when you do sit down and have a chat with them and say, look, when you say this, I'm not quite sure what is this what you're implying? Because I want to work and I want to be better. Because what that tells the individual is, like, you're not immediately jumping into conclusion, you're willing to work. And most humans, yes, you will get a few people that are just not humane and unpleasant and will continue. Actually, most humans, when you challenge them on a human level, it forces them to change, it forces them to actually go, right, I didn't realize this is what's happening, right? So I would say, particularly whoever you report into, try and build a relationship with them, manage that relationship, right? So with your boss, if your only time that you talk about your performance is at your 6 months annual appraisal or your 12 months annual appraisal, your career is not going anywhere, right? So what you need to do is take charge and go, right, okay, I want to be catching up with them on a regular basis. Put in their diary, whether it's a week, if they'll permit weekly, some people might say it's excessive, but ideally a monthly catch up with your boss, because you have to manage up, right? So put something in a diary on a monthly basis, just where you catch up, because sometimes obviously with the people they feel an affinity bias to, they probably do it informally, whether it's over coffee. You may not get the opportunity to say, look, we go for coffee, but put something in, just says, right, just want to sit down, just want to go through what I've done this month, right? Where can I improve? So you're consistently in their mind of the fact that you're consistently wanting to be improved and better. So that's one thing I would have done better. So I thought by just working harder that I was going to be seen. Actually, you need to work smarter. So I don't believe in the 10 times as hard, because the reason we're having to do 10 times as hard, we're hoping and dependent on only the work speaking for us. And you have to do both, right? So there's none of this. We're not talking about coasting. We're not talking about doing, you do the work, but make sure that the people that it needs to be visible to, you are having a meeting with them. You're having a face-to-face with them to take them through what you're doing, and also talking to them about some of the challenges, because they may be able to remove that. And also, just saying yes to everything doesn't get you anywhere, right? So it's almost like, yes, but I can deliver more if you give me more resource. And that's what made a real difference in my career, when I started to say, right, okay, I'll take that project on, but I'll manage the team that would deliver it. So therefore I need an extra head, right? Rather than this in a flat no, but it's actually yes, but if you were willing to invest, then we can get this outcome, yeah? So that's my biggest thing, is actually consistently having a conversation with those that you report into, and taking on projects, but also going back with the resource that's required to deliver it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good one in terms of that taking control, because the conversation that I've had with, some of the people in my circle, in terms of the group that I have around me, is that we've all got there, but we're, compared to our counterparts, we're a lot older. And so that is something that I think, had I been able to, rather than just take that, of course, yes, we'll work towards it, and then the following years, we'll work towards it. It would have been to hone them down to say, okay, what does this now look like, a lot sooner? So I think that's something that I would have definitely had said to myself, that confidence to not just want to fit in, do a good job, but that confidence to say, I want more, and I want more at the same time or sooner than my counterparts. Why? Because I deserve it. Why? Because I'm good at my job. And I think it's that bit to stand up and go, give me an excuse to, give me an excuse not to say yes.
Wow. Yemi, Yetunde, it's been a power hour. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think that's a good note to end on, just, speaking about what you would tell your younger self, and, these key lessons learned. Thank you so much for just sharing your journey, your personal experience. We've all learned so much, and it's also been really practical, which I think is always helpful. So yeah, thank you so much to everybody for joining. We'll share our contact details in the chat, the Equal Group. So please do connect with us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Yemi and Yetunde, please do share your contact details, your LinkedIn, social media, so people can keep in touch with you. I'm sure they have loads of more questions and loads more to learn from you. But thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for spending this hour with us and, pouring into all the guests. We hope everyone will join us for our next webinar, which is the last of the Black Future series, next Wednesday. It's all about social media marketing. What is the responsibility of social media platforms, and how can they better protect Black people? So this will be next Wednesday, 26th of October, 12 to 1. So we really look forward to seeing you, a lot of you there. But yeah, thank you for joining us, and I hope you have an amazing rest of the day. Thank you again to Yemi and Yetunde. It's been awesome.